Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to my next live stream. This is Livestream 29. Oh, there we go. Sorry, I just had to run down the stairs very quickly. Okay, so let's get stuck into where we left off, shall we? So, hello, my name's Simon Whiteley. I'm a system safety engineer and accident analysis specialist from the UK. I specialise in STAMP STPA hazard analysis and cast accident analysis. I provide training, coaching, consulting, facilitation and independent review. So if you need a hand with any of that or if you've got any questions, you're welcome to get in touch. And I've just noticed something's not quite right with the live stream, so just bear with me 1 second. That should be working now, hopefully. Yes, the levels are going up and down. Let's see if it's working. On LinkedIn, it seems to be fantastic. So hello, viewers. Okay, so if you, as I said, if you do want to get in touch, if you do have some questions or you want some help and support, you're welcome to contact me at my website, whiteley-safety.co.uk. Visit the homepage, click the big green button, I need help now. Send me a message, let me know how I can possibly help, what your issues are. I'll set up a call as soon as possible and we can answer your questions. Even if it's just, you're not sure about something, you just want a bit of clarification, please don't hesitate to get in touch. And of course, if you need some serious help and you need it really quick and you need me to jump on a plane in the middle of the night, I am prepared to do that. So get in touch and let me know. Now, in combination with this live stream series, And what I'm doing is running a free workshop once I've finished this stream. So hopefully tonight, fingers crossed, we'll finish the investigation report. I will then finish building a control structure model, a couple of those, and put some slides together. And then I'll set up a free workshop, so we can get together on Zoom, talk about STAMP, STPA and CAS, talk about this case study, talk about any questions or challenges that you've got. So if you want to visit, click the link in the description, join the waiting list, and when I run that session, I'll be sure to let you know. And like I mentioned, if you do want some foundation training, some beginner training, I do provide a one-day foundation training, which essentially gets you up to speed so that you could contribute to a STAMP, STPA or CAS project. You won't be able to facilitate it and do all of the fancy stuff because obviously it's only one day and there are certain skills we need to develop and do the reps and build your strength. But if you want a one-day foundation, a quick start, this is essentially it. So it's $997 plus VAT. When you click on this link, you'll go to a page to book some dates. I haven't set the next dates for the next series of months yet because there's a few things I need to get in place. But if you join the waiting list, when those dates come out, you can pick a date that suits you. So fantastic. Right, let's just have a look at the chat, see if there's anybody talking to me or giving me some abuse. No, there's not. Okay, fantastic. Well, as I say, please comment below. Let me know where you're watching from. I always like to know where everybody is in the world because I do get some quite interesting characters from all over the place. So I always like to know. There we go. Right, let's do this then. So where did we get up to? For some reason, my computer is making funny noises. Ah, right. That's why. Let's turn that off. Then it won't be distracting. There we go. Right. So where were we? So we got up to last time, we started working through yesterday. So this week we've done 2 live streams, live stream 27, live stream 28. We started to go through the crew commercial program STAR and SDRT report. So this is like 2 investigation teams work that's been put together in a report, which has formed an annex to this bigger pit team investigation report. And this is quite a large section. It's over 100 pages. And we started digging into it in detail yesterday on livestream 28 and hopefully in livestream 29, hopefully, fingers crossed, we will get through it today and then that'll be the end of the report. But as I say, it is quite a big section. So if I need to schedule some more live streams, then I'll just have to do that. There we go. Right. So yeah, there we go. There's the progress through that section of the report. So we've got through the first part. And we've got to get through all of this. So yeah, we're going to make some good progress. So we're going to pick up today with general findings. So let's do that then. General findings, everybody. There we go, general findings. Let's just make it big on the screen so you can see it if you're watching it on your smartphone. Here we go. Right, so general findings section. After interviewing approximately 40 NASA CCP experts with various experience working with Starliner since the inception of the commercial crew program, the STAR team uncovered several general findings. The first thing I'm going to emphasize here, let's get my phone out of the way. The first thing I just want to emphasize is that this mentions NASA CCP experts. It doesn't mention Boeing people. Or no, didn't mean to do that. No, stop. There we go. It doesn't mention Boeing people. It doesn't mention International Space Station people. So yeah, I'm a bit kind of, well, is this what we're looking at here really representative of what, what's going on? Is this what we're looking at really just a sliver of information? That's what I'm thinking about. So the STAR team uncovered several general findings. Although these items were not a direct focus of this investigation, they were contributing factors. Everyone loves some contributing factors. For the root causes, there we go, that's the term that I find a bit frustrating, of the technical issues investigated. So critical designs were set prior to CC. Okay, so critical designs were set prior to CCT cap. So CCT cap is one of the program milestones. So let's just jump out and look at the. There we go. So there's the CCTP cap contract award, which was in 2014. And what we're saying over here is critical designs were, yeah, there we go. You can see. So the service module propulsion PDR, CDR was before that actually happened. So you could argue that if there are issues with the safety assessment and the design, the architecture of the propulsion system, it was kind of baked in that time period, 2011, 2012, 13. So it's a full 10 years before the thing went flying, for the first time. Or was it the first time? Was it? Oh, there we go, 2021, 2019. So before they put people on it, it was 10 years. But before they went flying the OFT 1 and 2, 2019 and 2021, but they had issues with propulsion during that period. So yeah, there was opportunity to recognize the issues. So why was that opportunity lost or squandered? What was going on? Resources and skills were not adequate during key design activities prior to contract award. Okay, so thinking about the control loop, let's get our little jigsaw piece together. Where is it? There we go. Let's have our jigsaw piece down here. This is the core concept. So who or what is the controller in charge of, resources and skills? Who's in charge of that? What organization is in charge of that? Why does it make sense that they didn't have adequate resources and skills? That was talked a bit about yesterday on yesterday's live stream. But again, this is what the investigation should be going and digging into. Resources and skills were stressed during flight test and operations, resulting in competition between near-term flights and resolving long-term issues. So that balance between, the closest crocodile to the canoe. I'm sure you've heard that terminology, and it frustrates the hell out of me, because if you're on a canoe and there's some crocodiles coming and you're going to go over a waterfall, what do you deal with first? Do you deal with the crocodiles, or do you try and paddle away from the waterfall? Which is it? I'm not saying there's a correct answer. I'm just saying it's a stupid analogy that doesn't really help the complexity of this situation. Because you must, by definition, have some part of the control structure dealing with the crocodiles and another part of the control structure dealing with the waterfall, or trying to anticipate waterfalls and trying to keep away from them and make sure you've got enough power and enough people paddling to get away and not fall into a dangerous situation. Fundamentally, that's what the control structure is there for. And if your control structure, your organization does not have that, that is a fundamental issue with leadership, and leadership providing adequate resources to be able to perform the mission. There's no getting away from that. So yeah, what was going on there? In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little post-it note there to emphasize what colour should we use? Let's use purple. There we go. That's a nice colour. Closest crocodile to the canoe, and versus the impending waterfall. There we go. Crocodile. There we go. Let's stick that there. That's a nice reminder, isn't it? Okay, right. NASA. There we go. NASA staffing plans. Let's make it zoomed in so you can see it. NASA staffing plans. Post-award were not tailored for each provider's schedule and culture, with limited dedicated teams for each provider. Yeah. So it's kind of inevitable. If you're doing stuff like that, it's inevitable you're going to end up with issues like this on complex programs. We should know this by now. We shouldn't be faffing around like this. The rigor in resolving issues identified by NASA during design reviews was less than expected. At the beginning of CCT CAP, the focus was on SpaceX, human spaceflight design maturity, with a preconceived notion that Boeing was more experienced in human spaceflight. Okay, so again, the question is, let's get our jigsaw piece out. When it says the focus is on this, who is the controller? Who is the organization that's made the decision for that priority call? Why did it make sense to do that? What feedback did they receive, or should they have received, to say, hey, this is probably not a good idea, you know? And then again, there, the preconceived notion Boeing was more experienced. So that is representing the beliefs of the controller or people involved in that controller. That would kind of explain why they would behave that way. So I suppose there's a bit of a learning point there. If you're involved in a project, a huge project program like this one, and you're having to make similar priority calls, it might be worth looking for more feedback and trying to make more robust decisions. Maybe ask yourself a question: are my beliefs about this situation actually true? Am I making good decisions? What other feedback should I go looking for? And as I've said many times before, and I keep banging on about it, go and talk to the system safety engineers. Out of everybody across the program, and even above the quality people and the independent safety advisors, safety reviewers, go and talk to the actual safety engineers that are involved in the safety assessment work, and ask them what their relationship is like with the program project manager and the tempo and structure of their work. Ask them about their open actions. Ask them about the quality of the documents that they receive, their supplier documents. And they will tell you, if you build a good relationship with you, they will tell you the truth about the state of the safety on the program. And if you're not already asking those questions, I implore you to go and do it. It will be painful to begin with, but the return on that investment will be fantastic. It will drastically improve the safety on your program, and drastically improve the reality, the realness of the situation. Because if you're in a difficult program and everybody's stressed, everybody's having to do a lot of things and they haven't got enough time and resources, being able to communicate honestly and openly is going to be very, very difficult. People might not want to report, for various reasons. So go and talk to the safety team, the safety engineers, the guys and girls doing fault trees and FMEAs, and if you're lucky, they're already doing STPA. Go and talk to them. And if they're not doing STPA, then ask them why not. get them doing it. Get involved. Give them the resources to do it. It pays in dividends disproportionately. It's fantastic. Okay, right. So CCP requirements were adequate, but there was no spacecraft propulsion standard to provide guidance on qualification testing. Okay, so why was there not a propulsion standard? Why was there not one? If earlier in this part of the report it was saying NASA's done a lot of this stuff, so is there a spacecraft propulsion standard? It's just that it's not been provided, or what's the situation there? I think that's an action. That's a recommendation to get to the bottom of that, because you're going to need one for the future, and if you haven't already got one needs to be developed. Okay. NASA was unwilling to enforce the contract terms on Boeing due to prior cost and schedule overruns and the potential consequence of enforcement. See, that is interesting. That is very interesting. So if this is NASA and they are unwilling to enforce the contract terms on Boeing due to prior cost and schedule overruns and the potential consequence of enforcement, is the contract terms actually appropriate? Is the contract actually appropriate? Because the contract and the terms involved, and obviously I don't know, I've got no visibility of this, but based on some of my past painful experience, some of these contracts are basically dog shit. They're not written very well. They're not actually, they're just contractual documents. They don't actually respect that the contract applies to a control structure, and that the content of that contract can undermine safety. It can cause the parties to behave in a way that's adversarial. It is perhaps arguably not collaborative. It's more competitive. It's more adversarial than it really needs to be. And so, what does that contract actually say? Is it actually appropriate and respectful? Is it that the parties involved are actually playing collaboratively? And if they're not, then what can be done about that? Without necessarily calling in serious, enforcing serious contract terms. I think you know what I'm saying there. Maybe I'm being a bit harsh, but what does that contract look like? How does it influence the controllers in their behaviour? Is it really helpful and appropriate? Is it prescriptive enough? Is it goal set? Does it set goals at an appropriate level of abstraction? If you would like me to review that, get in touch. I would quite gladly give you some support and advice on that. Spot some fantastic opportunities. Anyway, shared accountability model. There we go. That's the thing I was banging on about yesterday. I expressed my displeasure about it. I think the contract terms and the shared accountability model, I think they will go a long way to explain a lot of the problems. I think if you have a look at those together, I think that would explain a lot of the issues we're seeing here with the way the program has been run. This is not simple failures and thrust anomalies. This is programmatic leadership faults, programmatic structural issues. Okay, so it did not go as planned, did not operate as planned. The burden was on NASA to prove it was unsafe. I mean, that's not how it's supposed to be. The contractor, the supplier, it is their duty, their responsibility to prove that their thing is safe. And any counter evidence to that, they should be open with it and get it out in the open. That's the principle of what a safety case is all about. And there are both arguments for and against safety cases, which I'm not going to get into now. In principle, I like the idea of safety cases. In practice, that's a whole different conversation, which we can maybe have in a separate forum. Okay, supplier contracts. There we go. Supplier contracts put in place early for lifetime buys of hardware design resulted in hardware propagation across numerous vehicles and increased impacts for change implementation. Yes, absolutely. Again, who decided it was a good idea to do the lifetime buys? Why did it make sense to do that? What constraints do we need putting in place in the future? How do we design this to be better? Because so many big complex programs stumble and fall with this exact problem, and it fundamentally screws up safety if we don't manage this really carefully. But again, there's in the organisation there's often silos. The procurement silo is often isolated from the people doing the safety work. They don't often talk to each other or develop trust between each other and share safety constraints amongst each other. Quite often, procurement goes off and does whatever it wants to do, and then the safety team have to then deal with the consequences of that. That's not how it should be. It should be properly coordinated. There we go. So qualification tests had shortcomings. Well, okay. Pardon me. Who is in charge of the qualification test? Who is the controller for that? Why would it make sense for them to allow those shortcomings to happen? Did they even know there were shortcomings? Or did they accept the shortcomings with some genuine reasons? If so, why was that? What do we need to prevent that or deal with that in the future? Lack of spare hardware available impacted ability to conduct testing when technical performance questions arose. Again, who or what is involved in the spares aspect of it? What were the issues going on there? Why would it make sense for this to be allowed to continue like that? Was this fed back to the senior levels in the program through their huge master schedule that basically says, hey, we haven't met this particular set of important safety and design engineering criteria. We need to do something with the program dates or the program delivery, the program dependencies. Were those conversations going on? I mean, we said yesterday about the structure of the board structure, the commercial crew program board structure, and we have these various boards. Which of these boards were dealing with those issues for qualification and testing? Were those issues being escalated? How were they actually being addressed? What's the management system behind this organization chart? That's the purpose of building a control structure model, to make those things explicit so we can explore and examine them carefully. Yeah, there we go. Supplier design build to data. Supplier design build data access constraints led to insight challenges. Again, this is safety information system level issues. Why was that an issue? What was being done to sort that out? Is it just one of those, it's just a contracts issue, or it's an IT issue, it's an admin issue? No, this is a critical safety issue that should be given the attention it needs. And again, I wonder if that was on the agenda, the list of issues and actions, forward actions for those boards. And if it wasn't, why wasn't it on there? The same for recruitment and retention and resourcing and skill levels. That should be on the agenda for those safety boards, and they should be escalating, getting that sorted out. Is that what they were doing? Is that what the boards were doing, or were they not doing that? If not, why not? If they were, great. Let's have a look at why that wasn't adequate. Suppliers build quality variability issues were hard to exonerate for the service modules. So again, who or what is in that control loop looking at the supplier and the build quality variability issues and the acceptance of that? And then where did that information, hey, there's an issue with quality and build quality and variability, where is that fed to in the senior levels of the structure? How was that actually addressed? It sounds like there's so many feedback issues and controller issues across the senior levels of this particular program and its interactions with its contractors and suppliers. And this part of the report, it highlights some of the issues, but where is the discussion? Where is the investigation of these issues? Maybe it's in the rest of the report. Let's not jump too far ahead. Unrealistic launch dates. Yeah, look at that, everybody. Everybody loves unrealistic dates, magical dates. Everybody loves that, don't they? Influence Boeing design and build decision. We shouldn't be surprised if we've got ridiculous dates and they're influencing design and build decision making. Then we've got a serious problem here. We've got a serious leadership problem. Don't get me wrong, I understand in certain circumstances the date is the date. Totally get that. But whenever the evidence starts to bubble up that the date is ridiculous based on the amount of engineering and all the other stuff that needs to happen, we shouldn't then just keep pushing on and ploughing on to that date. Because if everybody in the program knows that they're ridiculous magical dates, then you're forcing your staff to start pretending and start lying to themselves about the reality of the situation. And engineers, especially engineers like myself, we'd just rather have the issues out in the open on the table so we can deal with them. Talking about pretend dates and, focusing on dates instead of the engineering is precisely how you march your team off the cliff. So whenever there's evidence of that kind of nonsense going on, I would argue that, and this is my impression, I would argue that some of these safety boards should be calling senior leadership and the program management to account and saying, look, we can't be having ridiculous dates forced on everybody. We have to have a sense of reality of the situation. And maybe what I'm saying is a little bit naive. I can understand the politics and stuff going on. I can appreciate the politics going on. But we have to also reflect and respect that nonsense dates that are made up or issues with dates that keep slipping, people, it leads people not to want to talk to each other. It leads to increased stress in the program, stress in the people. It increases burnout and all of that good stuff, and it undermines people's trust. And when you're working in a complex program such as this, especially with such significant potential consequences, if you've got this kind of culture, these kind of lies going on, we can't be surprised when we start having bad things happen. So, we have to be open. We have to develop trust amongst ourselves. And if anything starts to undermine or, cause problems for that trust, it needs to be talked about out in the open. I'm assuming that's what's been going on. I'm getting a feel for that's what's going on based on my safety spidey sense. There we go. I should trademark that. I don't think this is a complete list, I'll be honest. All of these, every single one of these hints at issues in the control structure in a few hot spots, mainly in how the program is led, the leadership, the way activities, tasks, deliverables, and issues and actions are managed, and then how information is flowed amongst people. And then, of course, trust. It sounds like loss of trust is endemic all over the place. And, apart from it makes the day job a lot more difficult for people, it burns people out. It makes them not want to come to work anymore. So how are we going to expect them to perform to a high level and be disciplined and get stuff done under all of those conditions? It's just not fair or realistic, Anyway, let's keep moving. Right, what's all this then? So this is Figure 96, General Findings Matrix. So this is, let's have a look, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Wouldn't it be nice if it was a numbered list? I think this is all of them, isn't it? 3, 6, 9, 12, 15. Yeah, so that list there on the left, when my mouse stops flicking around, this list here is this list here. And handily, it's been stuck into 4 groups. Now, this one, I think, is helium. I probably should stick some text in there, shouldn't I? Let's do that. Where's my text box? There it is. Let's have one of those. Stick it over there. So this is helium failure tolerance. Helium failure tolerance. This next one down is helium seal material compatibility. Compatibility. There we go. Learn how to spell on my live stream. Service module thermal environment. Service module thermal environment. I tell you, the thermal environment in my office is ridiculous. It is so hot. Again, it's honestly, I'm not used to it. All the grass around the local area looks like it's dying. It's so yellow and pale. Yeah, it's not good. I do wonder if the El Nino is having any impact on our weather. And depending on which YouTube channels and what people you follow on Twitter, they're also talking about the potential for a pole flip. So that should be exciting. I don't know how true that is, but it's... Anyway, right, so we've got helium failure tolerance, helium seal material compatibility, service module thruster failures, RTS thruster failures, service module thermal environment. There we go. So, yeah, again, this is not the easiest way to present information. So that one relates to 3 particular issues. So does resources affect everything? So 1, 2, 3. So resources doesn't affect that one. That's interesting. Resources not adequate affects that one. NASA staffing plans affects that one. Yeah. Next time, what I'd recommend is put a table, list these number 1 to 15, put a table, and then just put, call these topic A, B, C, D, and just put A, B, C, D in each box, or 4 columns, and then just put it in that way. So it's nice and quick for the reader. But I know I think these guys and girls also worked very fast to produce these reports, so I can understand this might be quick for the author, but very slow for the reader, the audience. Anyway, let's just have a quick drink and check the chat, see if anyone's giving me any abuse. Stand by. Unmute. Honestly, I can't believe I spent 20 minutes jabbering away on mute yesterday. I'm so sorry. I will try my best as a human being not to do that again. There we go. Right. Okay. So this is the next section. This is also about general findings. So here we go. During the SAA phase, so let's just zoom out and have a look where that is on that nice little diagram we had earlier on. Where is it? There we go. Look, SAA phase. So this one, and this one. So that time period, SAA phase, should I say? Design decisions and implementation were proceeding with a light engineering touch. What does that mean, everybody? Does that mean it's a light touch, but we've got the right people doing it? Or it's a light touch because we haven't got enough of the right people? Which is it? By the time NASA requirements were understood, the timeline was not realistic for implementing new designs. Through CCT cap, NASA, actually, I need to make these different colours, don't I? Because they are time windows, Simon. And I like to use yellow because it's easy to see and stand out. There we go, CC. There we go, right. Pardon me. Through CCT cap, NASA was finally able to see and approve Boeing's early decisions pertaining to NASA products and expectations for performance as they related to NASA crew. Right. Acquisition strategy and contracts. SAA phase 2010 to 2014. So let's just duplicate that, and then I don't have to keep jumping around on the screen. Come on, Miro. There we go. Right, let's just go over here to the graph. See, there we go. Look. So let's just put that to one side there. Put that to one side there. Right. So the SAA phase 2010 to 2014, commercial crew used Space Act agreements in the early years. So I'm using purple to highlight documentation as distinct things that we could potentially reference if we needed to. In the early years, calling for industry partners to develop crew transportation capabilities, requirements, and to perform tests to verify, validate, and mature component and integrator designs. Guidance on SAA interaction limited NASA technical direction and feedback during preliminary and critical design reviews. limiting comments, oh god, and suggestions on design trades and requirement compliance. Okay, before we continue, let's just have a think for a minute about that. So the organisation Commercial Crew used Space Act agreements in the early years. So this is the Commercial Crew controller. They provided Space Act agreements in the early years of the program, and also associated guidance. So this is the guidance there. Look, so these two were essentially provided as control actions to the program, to the suppliers, to the to the industry partners. There we go. So Commercial Crew as an entity, as a stakeholder, as a controller, they provided Space Act agreements to the industry partners, so from there to there, and they also provided guidance. And that guidance constrained the industry partners and NASA in terms of the technical direction and feedback during the early and most critical parts of the system lifecycle, and limited comments and suggestions. So for me, this if you were going to bang on about root causes, I'd argue that this is, one of the thickest root causes you could find. If those agreements and guidance are basically stopping NASA from doing its important role, its important work during the most critical part of the life cycle, we can't really be surprised we've got these problems. And that means potentially wherever this guidance and this limitation is applied to all of the other subsystems on the spacecraft that relate to safety and mission success, I wouldn't be surprised if they are also similarly hobbled, not hobnob, hobbled, undermined as well. And so a recommendation I'd make is to go and do a technical review, a technical audit of all of those other safety critical, mission critical subsystems to find out how they've also been hobbled by this. Because, this is it's just that the propulsion system is something that's used a lot. It's so important to the mission that these issues have, become apparent. Whereas how many other systems, how many other capabilities are also undermined by this kind of restrictive behavior? I mean, in theory, it sounds like a great idea from a program management perspective, but when you look at it through the lens of a control structure and how that affects safety, all of a sudden it seems quite obvious that this kind of stuff is dangerous and it needs to be dealt with. It needs to be addressed. There needs to be some recommendations to unpick that and certainly not have that kind of nonsense on future programs. The control structure needs a fundamental change to address that, and it needs a fundamental activity to recover from it. That's if it can be recovered, because it may be that there's loads of fundamental safety issues baked into these systems that can't be undone without spending a fortune. It might even be cheaper to start from scratch, as ridiculous as that might sound. I mean, this section here, this is absolutely fantastic. This is fundamental to this this case study, this accident. And this is the thing, if you use STPA, you can apply it in the earliest possible stages of your program, in the concept stage. You can identify safety requirements, safety constraints. You can identify architectural requirements and constraints very, very quickly, even before you've decided on what technology, what actuators and sensors you're going to use. That's one of the beauties of it. Now, of course, you can't do that with fault trees and FMEAs and all of that good stuff, because you need to have done a functional hazard assessment typically. You need to know what components you're going to use and what type of failure rate data you're going to use. I mean, very broadly. But if you use STPA, you can use it so much earlier and perhaps even supercharge your fault trees and FMEAs, focus your FMEAs a bit more. Now, imagine if this program had used STPA back in 2010 to 2014. We wouldn't be here today. I'm almost certain we wouldn't be here today with this issue of having happened. They would have caught it early and dealt with it. But again, I say that with the benefit of hindsight, but also I also have to reflect that, you know, the issues that are on the previous page about organizations and resources and skills and staffing and the change in contract terms and the shared accountability model, even if you could do STPA in that circumstance, that context, you would really struggle. You know, and as I've said, I don't think the shared accountability model as it's described, the contract terms as it's hinted at, and then with these issues here, you know, that's it. They're your fundamental flaws baked in from the very beginning of the program. And these issues will exist in other programs, I'm pretty sure. If you work in big programs that have this similar sort of stuff going on, you know, the clock is ticking. Something's going to happen that's expensive. Okay, right, CCTP cap. So this is not that one, it's this one. So that's this point going forward here, look. So there's CCT cap. Let me just close that. There we go, right. There we go, right. CCT cap 2014 to present. So limited technical interaction culture. There we go. Mandated by the SAA's approach, remained in the early contract phase. So the limited interaction culture, there we go. So this was going to happen. This is going to happen. There's no getting away with it. When this kind of nonsense starts happening, it's inevitable. There's no probability about it, is what I'm saying. If that's how the organisations are behaving, that's how they are required to behave because they are overly constrained inappropriately, then, you know, systematic leadership issues, contractual issues, structural issues. Anyway, right, at the start of CCT cap, why don't they just call it phase 1, 2, 3 or phase whatever, phase Alpha Bravo Charlie or phase Red Orange Yellow or whatever. At the start of CCT cap, Boeing's main focus was to finalize the designs, to award supplier contracts. Again, there we go. So the control action to award supplier contracts and how all the contracts are done, how money is transferred, you know, in terms of payments and all that kind of stuff. All of those constraints fundamentally disrupt the engineering process, and that particularly the safety engineering process. I mean, I've seen it loads of times on loads of complex programs, and it just disrupts everything you're trying to do. It disrupts the flow of the work. It disrupts people's currency on things. I know it's not an easy problem to solve. I'm not suggesting that it is, but it is a big source of problems in safety engineering. Relying on design reviews held prior to contract initiation. Again, design reviews and contract milestones, they should be decoupled, or they should be coupled in a way that doesn't force the people involved to behave in a certain way. You know, like, well, I'll give you, how can I give this example without saying too much? Imagine that a supplier doesn't get paid until the safety case report is reviewed and signed off. And imagine that the safety case hasn't been updated for many years, and so they're rushing to get it updated for that milestone, and then the independent reviewer of that safety case finds loads of holes in it. What do we do then? You know, what do we do then? Do we pause the contract milestone and the payment milestone while we sort out the problems with the safety case report document and the actual engineering safety problems that are implied by the content of the safety case report? Or do we have loads of open actions and just sign it off and then hope that those actions actually get addressed after the payment has been made? Given that there's no contract for ongoing support after this milestone, and there may never be one. Or B, do we just ignore the review comments and get rid of the reviewer, and then we can sign the safety case off, everyone gets paid, and everything's fine? Option A, option B, which one do we want to do? Comment below if you've been in a similar situation. Would you choose option A or option B? Anyway, let's keep going. The contract baseline review, the CBR, so that's what that is. The contract baseline review. There we go, everybody. So that's finally what it is. We've seen it all over the place, but we didn't know what it was, but now we do. Certification baseline review. CBR. Right, what we'll do is we'll put that there, but we'll also put it over here. So where is the CBR, everybody? Ah, there it is. CBR. Let's get my pencil. Where's my pencil? Let's get a new colour today. Let's get a fancy colour. What colour shall we have? Let's have a pink one. There we go. That'll be cool. Right, certification baseline review. There we go. So what is a DCDR? Is that a Delta CDR? Is it a change from this one? Is it another critical design review? What is it? What's going on there, everybody? Right. I'm too old for this. Anyway. It was green last time, wasn't it? There we go. Right. So the CBR, the Certification Baseline Review, the first milestone on the contract. Yay! Focused on processes and management plans. Everybody loves management plans. To allow funding release. There we go. What was I saying a few minutes ago? Mitigating impacts of contract delays due to Sierra Nevada protest. Oh, right. Okay. So interesting. So there's a bit of what's the word? Hanky panky going on, for want of a better description. The CBR did not meet the expected intention to level set the commercial provider's technical baseline for the DDT and E contract at contract start. Sorry, DDT and E. That's design, development, test, and evaluation at contract start. Okay. So the Delta. Oh, there he. See, I guessed. I knew it was. I knew it was going to be. The Delta certification design review. Oh, it's a certification design review, not a critical design review. That is so annoying. Why does it keep doing that? Go away. There we go. Right. Delta certification design review. DCDR. Right. Let's take that over there. DCDR. There we go. That's it. So we need a pen with a funky colour. Let's use pink again. That'd be nice, wouldn't it? Right, where's my mouse? There we go. The Delta certification design. You see, the thing is that's interesting is we're talking about certification and certification baseline. But what about the design baseline, the design review? Because you'll have a concept, you'll have a set of high-level requirements. Those requirements will be interpreted in some shape or form. There'll have to be some form of agreement on that interpretation. Then they go ahead and do architecture and design. And then the design that pops out of that, the architecture that pops out of that, has to be reviewed and agreed by some stakeholders. But alongside that, you've got certification activities, certification requirements. And some of those will be common across both of those things, but it's not the same thing. And so how those two distinct things are managed, and whether there's I've seen it a few times where there's a misunderstanding of the difference between the two and they get jumbled together, that can cause complexity and challenges in its own right. Now, obviously, I don't know about spacecraft certification. I know civil air transport, large aircraft, large helicopters. So CS25, FAR25, CS23, FAR23, and then FAR29, CS29 certification regulations, airworthiness. Imagine it's similar to this, but not the same. And like I said, like with civil air transport, CS25 or FAR25 1309 and its requirements for system safety and no single point failures due to can lead to catastrophic accidents and all of that good stuff. Whilst that is certification requirements, they are pulled into the technical requirements or architecture requirements or safety requirements of a particular project, system design, system architecture, whatever it is. So there is a link between both of these, but they are distinct things, or they should be treated, with the appropriate respect. And again, I am assuming it's the same or similar for space. I could be talking complete nonsense, and if I am, please feel free to give me some abuse in the comments. Okay, so the Delta Certification Design Review was held after contract reward. Was a missed opportunity to resolve known design issues identified in the SAAs. So that's the Space Act agreements. And the CPC. What is the CPC, everybody? CPC, what is it? Boeing Starliner official report. Where is it? It is there, right. Let's have a look at CPC. CPC. Oh, there we go. Look, certification, products, contracts. See, that was easy. Amazing. There we go. Certification, products, contract. Right. So that means that over here, CPC. Where's CPC, everybody? There it is. Look at that. There it is. CPC. Let's get a pen. Oh, sugar. So the Delta Certification Design Review held after contract award was a missed opportunity to resolve known design issues identified in the SAAs and CPC. Okay, so when they say known design issues, is it that all of the stakeholders knew that there were design issues, and so it's not clear how they actually dealt with them or didn't deal with them? That's the point in the investigation. It should go and find that out. Or is it that certain senior stakeholders didn't know that there were issues, and so they didn't get the necessary attention and priority that they needed? Which is it? That's what this investigation should look for, or a follow-on investigation should look for. Yeah, okay, right. Schedules. Unrealistic schedules. Unrealistic schedules. Actually, let's just talk about that topic for a minute. Unrealistic schedules, right. Who or what are involved in defining the schedule? Who are the stakeholders involved in doing that activity? And why would it make sense for them to provide unrealistic schedules? Is it because the people that they are requesting information from do not have the time or resources or skills to create a schedule of the work that they're doing and with estimates of time? Or is it that they have people that have done exactly that and given a realistic schedule with some, 3-point estimation on it, best case, worst case, most likely case, and provided that to the senior leadership who are doing the planning and scheduling, and they've just ignored it? Or it's provided in the tool that's so complex no one knows how to use it. Or it's provided in a spreadsheet that keeps breaking every time someone tries to update it. it doesn't really matter which of those it is. The question is, what is going on with the scheduling? What is, who is the controller that's in charge of the schedule? What decisions are they making? What beliefs, mental models do they have? What feedback do they have? Who or what is the controller above them? What procedures and process are they following? What are the tools and formats they should be working to? What is going on there? And do they understand how damaging an unrealistic schedule is? And when I say unrealistic, I mean, I mean fantastical or magical ones that are so ridiculous. Everyone knows they're ridiculous, but everyone continues to just lie or ignore them. It just, because that has a real impact on culture and the way people behave. Anyway, let's keep going. Resulted in unneeded schedule pressure. Yes, absolutely, unneeded schedule pressure. Yeah, there we go. Likely resulting in early design and implementation trade made for perceived upcoming missions. Yeah, I think that's entirely reasonable to say that. I think we could probably turn that into a certainty if you ask people. If the engineering teams have basically been said these are the dates, and so they've said, well, we're going to have to make this engineering trade-off, which we don't really want to do, but you're forcing us to do because of program reasons, then yeah, I mean, those design reviews, those meetings that discussed that and agreed it, there should be minutes of those meetings, and you should be able to go back and find out how things were led, how things went. Okay, so noted more focus on OFT 1 and 2 anomalies and resolution without an ability to look ahead to the crewed flight test. Yeah, that's interesting. More focus on OFT without an ability to look ahead to the crewed flight test. That's quite interesting. So is it that the teams, the engineers, they've been focused on creating a crewed flight test qualifiable and capable spacecraft in the OFT timescales instead of having enough time to do better engineering for the crewed flight test? Yeah, I mean, that's interesting in its own right. So you could say that the schedules are, whilst they're not controllers providing control, well, is a schedule providing a control action to the teams, to team leadership, influencing their decision making? Yes, it is. Is it a true control action? Well, it depends, isn't it? If the program manager says that's the date, crack on, then I suppose that is a control action. But if it's here's the date, do with it what you will, they're going to impose the pressure themselves and try and kill themselves achieving that. Okay, so schedules often drove, yeah, so if the schedules drove what was accepted, then the schedules are a type of control action. That's how I would interpret it. A contributory control action. So drove what was accepted as use as is to impact schedule versus what should have been fixed to improve the spacecraft. Yeah. So if I was doing a cast analysis, I would say that is one of the most significant contributory control actions to this this case of affairs. And the thing is, that type of unsafe control action affects every subsystem, every system across the spacecraft. So I think a recommendation is to go looking for other problems that have originated from this point and see what actions are needed to recover them or replace them, if you understand where I'm coming from. Okay, insight. Insight data was difficult to access, constrained to select NASA personnel, and further constrained by component system supplier limited insight. Insight data may have been available requested by other NASA personnel or Boeing, but took time to find and often utilize critical engineering resources to collect. Yeah, so this is about management of data, data management, data control, what do they call it? Knowledge management as a discipline. Chucking everything in a folder on a network drive that always seems to be getting full, and they never bother to actually make the space bigger for everyone to be able to do their work. Or the information isn't catalogued and controlled in a way that it's, everyone knows what there is, like a master data record, master data list. The referencing is poor, the links are poor, you can't always read it, the quality of the documents are bad. They're like PDFs with graphs in it that you can't read, such as this report. Version control, not knowing what's the latest version, which is the formally released version. I mean, one of my bugbears is people throw PDF reports around and via email, and you can't be certain whether it's actually a formally sanctioned release document, even if it's got a signature page. Or you don't know how many pages there are in the document. You don't know if there are pages missing. One of my previous past lives as an engineer was as a technical author for safety critical information. So I know how important it is to make sure information is properly controlled and written in simplified English so everyone understands it and it's unambiguous. Yes. Anyway, where we go. So contract insight data access was not executed as required in the contract. Ooh. Or in the insight plan provided in Boeing deliverables. Further, NASA did not enforce the insight clause. Okay, so why would it make sense not to do that? What are the implications of it? That is certainly something that should be explored. And of course, this is the same. This will happen on many programs. It's probably happening on most of their programs today. It's probably happening on your programs. Go and find out. Go and ask the safety engineers. Hey, safety engineer bros and gals, how's it going? Tell me about your access to supply data. How's it going? Are you getting good support? Is it easy to access? Do you know what the latest version is? Are you been told when it's been updated? Are you been told that your comments have been addressed? Are there any open actions that need to be addressed? And again, recognize that there's a huge admin burden associated with information management. And like it says here, it should not. Where is it? There was a mention about there we go. Look, engineering resources. Often utilized critical engineering resources to collect. You should have an information manager that is friends with everybody in the program, and everyone in the program should know who that person is and be able to go and talk to them on a first name basis so that they know where all the information is and that any information issues can be addressed. Likewise, there should be somebody who is an administrator of review comments and actions. It shouldn't just be left up to the engineers to do all of that administrative burden. They haven't got the headspace to deal with administration. They've got to get on with the engineering. So why would we be paying engineers to do administrative activity? And I'm not saying administrative activity and the people that do that work is not valuable. It is really valuable. It's critically important. But it needs to be allocated to the right controllers in the control structure. And allocating it to safety engineers, whether explicitly or not, or engineering community explicitly or not, is not a useful, is not a good use of their valuable time. So get some administrators to do it, some fantastic admins that everyone know and love and can support. They are key to the, key to these this activity, key to the organisation, should I say, the program's success. Right, okay, I've banged on about that. The shared accountability approach, oh yeah, there we go, that's this magical new approach, was inconsistently applied. And for subsystems, some systems did not work as planned. I don't think the plan was good to start with. I don't think that concept is actually appropriate. I think that needs a proper going over with STPA. I'm certain it would show that it's nonsense. No offense to the creators, but how it's been described and what I've seen so far contributed to these issues, I think. NASA incorrectly assumed the commercial providers to levy requirements. What? NASA incorrectly assumed the commercial providers, is that would levy requirements and testing on their suppliers? The commercial provider focused on meeting contract. Oh no. No. The commercial provider focused on meeting contractual requirement language, resulting in insufficient demonstration across the component system and ground flight. Okay. So why would it make sense for the commercial provider to focus on contractual requirement language? It's going to be one of a few things. The first one is if they haven't got enough time or money to focus on everything they need to focus on, they're naturally going to focus on the things that their NASA in this case, their client contractual requirements. Because contractual requirements are a clear specification of what the client wants you to do. And so if you haven't got time to do everything you need to do, one of the ways to distract away from that is to focus on what's in the contract and make everyone focus on the contract instead of the elephant in the room, which is the actual engineer and actual safety engineer of the program. So let's just focus on contractual requirements, shall we? And then as long as we sort out the contractual requirements, then other people in the background can hopefully sort out all of the other mess and engineering that's going on. And so they'll focus on the contract. And the client, who may not necessarily realise that that's what's going on, may be happy with that. Oh, well, we've told them this is what we want and this is what they're focusing on. Fantastic. But what about all of the other emergent requirements and constraints and issues that come out of doing the work? What about all of that? How do we look at that and deal with it? How does, it sounds like NASA doesn't have the resources and is not allowed to look at all of that other stuff, given the space agreements that were mentioned earlier on. So again, insufficient demonstration across component system and ground flight. I'm not surprised. I've seen that many times on programs and it's quite ridiculous. But again, it's a leadership issue. It's a leadership issue driven by inadequate contracts or inadequate behavior of program staff and project managers trying to do what the client wants, the contract, whilst not having the resources and support to do everything else they really need to. They're trying to do the best they can given the circumstances. Okay, right. So we've moaned and complained about all of that. Give me some comments. Is any of this stuff making sense? Do I sound like I'm going crazy, like I've been abused? I have been abused. Right, communications and interaction. Okay, that's great. Right, before I jump to that, let's just jump out and get the slide from the cast analysis that we made earlier. There we go. Let's zoom back in. Paste. There we go. Right, let's just have a look at this for a minute. So this, where we go, this section here, communication and interaction. I'm emphasizing this bit in cast analysis because if you don't know anything about cast accident analysis, essentially it's an approach to analyzing accidents based on STAMP. So STAMP is the accident causality model and a series of principles about how accidents occur and why, for example, failures are only part of the picture. We also need to think about dangerous successes, as in what went right that led to the accident, in addition to what went wrong, which is the traditional focus of investigations. And as part of cast analysis, there are three elements to the analysis. There is there is component analysis, physical analysis, where energy is transferred and actual harm occurs. Then we've got the controller analysis, which is this part, the component analysis, components of the control structure. And then we've got the structure analysis itself. Now, in the structure analysis, there's sort of 7 broad topics to think about. And this is not an exhaustive list, but it's a good sort of starting point. One of those topics, funnily enough, if you notice there, communication and interaction, funnily enough, it's in this list here. Look, communication and coordination, structure, architecture, and interactions. We've already touched on dynamics and evolution and changes due to contract changes already, so I won't bang on about that. I've already mentioned safety information system in terms of the different stakeholders and suppliers sharing information or not. But let's just talk about communication, coordination, and structure, architecture, and interactions. Let's see what this next section says about those topics. There we go. Right, so communication and interaction. The relationships and culture. There was a perceived notion, so perception is a belief, and it might not match reality, it might just be a perception, a belief that's inadequate. There was a perception, preconceived notion. That's a perception, is it? It's been a long day, and it's Friday. Happy Friday, everybody. A long few weeks, few months, few years. There was a perceived notion that Boeing was more experienced in design and development of human space transportation systems, and NASA had a false sense of security with their system design and component selection ability based on significant demonstration of successful experience and relationships spanning human spaceflight. I mean, I don't know the history too well, to be fair, so I can't really comment on that. But it would be really nice if there were some references here to what that might be. Why would it? What's the evidence that those beliefs were reasonable and expected? Is it that they've? I don't know I don't think they were involved in the space shuttle. I thought that was Rockwell, but I don't know. I can't remember. In fact, actually, they do other stuff, don't they? Like the X-37B, but that's unmanned as far as I'm aware, uncrewed as far as I'm aware, unless something sneaky beaky is going on. But yeah, so based on significant demonstration and successful experience and relationships, well, it does say spanning human spaceflight. So if I'm assuming X-37B is unmanned, then it's not related to that. Anyway, the NASA to Boeing relationships and interactions were limited to the commercial provider's contract requirement definition. So this contractual requirement definition then, contract requirement definition, is this a reference document or what is it? I don't know. Pardon me, is that a document that describes constraints, definitions, or what is it? I don't really know what that is. Boeing relationships and interactions were limited to the contract requirement definition. So does that mean that when we're talking about, sorry, let's just zoom down here. When we're talking about structure, architecture, and interactions, are we saying that the the commercial provider's contract requirement definition was for all intents and purposes, a type of controller in that it constrains the relationships and interactions between NASA and Boeing? Because if that's what it's saying, whatever this document is and how it affects the control structure needs to be understood. So I'd suggest an action there, a recommendation to review that contract through the lens of a control structure and understand what it actually does, because that could be fundamentally undermining safety and mission success, contract success. I'd certainly want to look at that. I would absolutely recommend that. There we go. NASA felt the need to prove it's unsafe or prove that it will fail. I mean, that's the complete opposite of what we should be doing with safety. NASA shouldn't need to prove it's unsafe or prove that it will fail. The contractor, the supplier, it is their responsibility to demonstrate why their thing, whatever it is safe or presents an acceptable risk. And then NASA can agree or disagree. They shouldn't have to prove anything. You know, that's completely the arse about face. Boeing providing the verification evidence sufficient to conclude proving it safe. Yeah, I mean, if I was being really pedantic, and actually, no, pedantic's not the right word. Some of the cybersecurity stuff I've noticed is that they have red teams that are specifically tasked with trying to get in and do whatever they can. And the more I learn about STPA sec and the things that are involved in that, the more I think that STPA itself should have the concept of red team and blue team included in it. So the blue team would be the traditional safety engineers doing the analysis, generating requirements, building the control structure model. But then you should have a system safety red team that is specifically trying to break the control structure. And then the results of both of those teams' efforts, essentially you've got one team trying to prove that it's safe and one team trying to break it and prove it's unsafe. And the combination of those two teams working together, I think, will lead to a better system, a better architecture, and fundamentally a better safety case, a lower level of risk. But of course, that's a bit more expensive and a bit different to how safety engineers typically work. But I think that would be really beneficial, having a system safety red team and a system safety blue team. And I'd be happy to support that activity. You know, the experience I've got, I'm pretty good at finding things nowadays. My safety spidey sense is pretty attuned. So application of that approach facilitated a culture. There we go, safety culture, everybody. That's on our little, there we go, safety culture. Facilitate a safety culture with the shared belief that there was a chance to succeed. There was no reason to stop or change direction. Yeah, there we go. I mean, that's a shared mental model. Interesting. Just bear with me a second. Let's check the chat. Make sure I unmute. Everything seems to be fine. Let's just check. Is the audio there? Yes, right. The audio is still working. Great. Fantastic. Okay, so comments and suggestions were not adequately considered, incorporated into products, or explored sufficiently. NASA relationships with Boeing became strained, resulting in reduced communication and technical feedback. Yes, that is not good. So if you were thinking about the design of your safety management system for programs such as this, like I mentioned before, go and talk to the safety engineering team, because reduced communication, strained relationships, issues with trust, technical feedback, they are warning signs that something's not right. They're leading indicators. There we go. Everyone loves a leading indicator. That is a leading indicator that there's something not right here, and it needs to be grasped robustly and dealt with accordingly. And I'm not saying that's easy, but it certainly must be recognised and dealt with. Okay, right. Next one, resources and priorities. Crew commercial program, or is it commercial crew program? I keep getting it mixed up. Is comprised of exceptionally talented and dedicated personnel Pardon me, fantastic. Hello, all of you exceptionally talented and dedicated personnel. Thank you for coming to my live stream. It's fantastic to see you. Um, this is fantastic. Always like to hear that. And again, if you've got the best team in the world doing, fantastic things that are really talented and dedicated, they can be undermined by the contract structure, the control structure. Their behaviours are driven by those things. So even if you've got the best team in the world doing the best safety engineering in the world, if you've got these issues with structure and controllers in the higher levels of leadership, you know, you're going to run into problems. It does, almost doesn't matter if you've got the best team in the world if you've got issues with the structure. It helps to have the best people in the world, but even if you do, if the structure is hamstringing them, then what do we expect? Through the interview process, the team did not observe any withholding of opinions or assessments. Fantastic. That's what we want. Fantastic. That is the kind of team and culture we need. The problem is, they may have expressed these issues already in the past over many years, providing feedback to leadership above, and it's just gone nowhere. So why was that? Why is that? What's going on there? Because most engineers I know, especially involved in safety, there are a few exceptions which I won't talk about, but generally engineers are going to tell you the truth, tell you how things are. And generally, in my experience, it's the program managers and project managers who are not engineers who filter that information, that feedback out before it goes to leadership. And that's just an observation I've made over many programs over the years. And I think I might have discussed this before. If you've ever done any personality profile tests like the Myers-Briggs MBTI or the DISC profile, I'm aware that there are issues and limitations and all of that good stuff, but it's a set of good models to at least make you aware to think that these things exist and that people, do have different personalities, different profiles based on all manner of different things. And also, when we think about things through the lens of DISC, and there's a great book by, I think, a chap called Thomas Erickson. It's a book called Surrounded by Idiots. He's done a series of books. I've read a number of them. I recommend reading them. It's a bit facetious, the title, but anyway. Another one is called Surrounded by Bad Managers. Another one is Surrounded by Psychopaths, I think I remember. So yeah, go and have a look at Thomas Erickson's books on DISC. But essentially DISC is DISC, dominance red, influence yellow, stability green, and compliance blue. And the dominant and compliance, the red and the blue, they are focused on task and mission and process, and following the rules, following the blues more so than the reds. And then yellows and greens, they're more people focused, influence focused. So, sorry, the yellow and the green, influence and stability. And often people who get into project management and program management, typically they are high yellow or high influence. So they're all about the people, all about trying to get people to do stuff. And they don't necessarily pay too much attention to the technical detail or the process. And so if you get a high dominance and a high compliance person involved in that kind of situation, they don't tend to play too well, from my personal experience. So it's important to recognize those personality aspects and the priority and focus of those individuals, and then try and get a feel for whether they need support in the particular role that they're performing. So, of course, the engineers are quite often high C, high compliance, focused on the detail of the engineering. And the people that receive that feedback are often high influence, not necessarily too interested for various reasons in the technical detail, more in the people and the project as opposed to the details of the technical aspects. So, yeah, have a look at that. It's very interesting. There was no evidence of concern. Oh, here we go. There was no evidence of concerns not been surfaced. Oh, there we go. During flight readiness discussions prior to CFT, hindsight allows a different perspective. Yeah, there we go, everyone. Hindsight. We all love a bit of hindsight. allows a different perspective and results, and a different conclusion when flight performance highlights missed opportunities in the early design phases. NASA was understaffed at contract award, so they're already operating at a disadvantage, supporting 2 commercial providers. So they've got a lot there to think about, and it's not easy. I think when you're trying to understand what the work is that people need to do and how to break it up and how the processes flow and how the requirements fit into it, whether it's contractor requirements or technical requirements, it's really simple, really easy to go, oh, well, it's just a spacecraft. Surely you can review this. You're a spacecraft person, aren't you? You know how to do this. Oh, we've got another spacecraft with a completely different supplier, with a completely different architecture. Oh, it's just a spacecraft. You can review that as well, can you? And to some extent, people can. But when you have to read into a topic, many, many hundreds, if not thousands of pages, we're all human beings. And as we get older, we can't necessarily remember all of this stuff. So, it makes sense to make the work, fit the people, the resources you've got. So if you're going to have 2 commercial providers with 2 different architectures and designs, allocate a team to that and then allocate a different team to something else, and then allow them to cross-pollinate ideas and issues and solutions, but don't expect them to try and do everything, because people's brains just don't have that, enough of that capacity. I mean, it's obvious, it's self-evident that that's the case, but sometimes we try to do too much. We all try to do too much all the time. There's so much to do. So of course we're going to try and do too much, but that undermines our ability to perform, and it puts extra stress and potential for burnout on people, and ultimately it's not good for the program. So why would we do this to ourselves? Let's let leadership actually lead properly with the resources they've got, and not try and force burnout and trying to do too much. I know it's not easy. I'm not saying it's easy. Okay, when the support teams were also struggling with priorities, steep learning curve. I've just been saying this. Steep learning curve for new personnel on the program. Right. I don't want to share too much, but some of the past programs I've worked on are mind-bogglingly complex. I mean, ridiculous. And you have literally thousands of pages to read. Not just when you start a new job, you've got all the induction administrative nonsense that any organization has, but you've also got an introduction to the program. You should have an introduction to the program. You should have an introduction to the system itself and the subsystems. And as a safety engineer, you need an introduction to the safety engineering, the safety case, the safety analysis, the requirement set. And then, of course, there's all of the open actions and issues and questions and review comments and all of that good stuff. And you've got to get through all of that realistically before you can be a meaningful contributing team member. And of course, if you're a young person as well with relatively little experience on a program, it's not really that exciting reading all that info. Well, it's not exciting for anybody. But as a young person, you don't necessarily realise how important it is to get properly bed in. But most organisations just don't want to give you the time to do that. And especially as a contractor, they expect you to be able to deliver as soon as you arrive. And it's just ridiculous. It's a retarded expectation. And those that persist with that expectation, they need calling out. It's ridiculous. So the steep learning curve for new personnel on the program, I completely understand that. And if you don't have a leadership that's actually prioritizing properly or giving the support necessary to people, we wonder why they struggle. We wonder why they don't get stuff done and they decide to move on and take that knowledge and experience with them. And as I said, a lot of the complex programs I've worked on, they're just... and the other thing, so it's program, product, system or service, the particular safety case or safety assessments, the requirements set, the history, the politics, the mistakes, open actions, review comments, all of that good stuff. And then, of course, the organization itself. So, who does what? Where do they sit? What is the organization structure? And that includes the organization you work within, but also the suppliers, customers, clients, all of that stuff. And then the last part is the information architecture, the information structure, and how to get access to it. And if you've got people struggling getting access to information, which this has already said they do, not only have these guys and girls got a steep learning curve, they can't get the information. So how are they supposed? You're just making it more difficult for everybody. Anyway, I've moaned about that. Yeah. So just to summarize that, then there's three prongs to any project. There is the project and program, product, service, or system. There is the organizational breakdown, the team breakdown, and then there's the information structure and things like actions. So those three, you need to learn and get up to speed on those three things as quickly as possible. And the more complex the program, the more complex the systems, the more difficult it is. And that should be reflected in how much people get paid as well. People doing that kind of work are not doing basic things. They're doing really hard stuff, and they should be remunerated with that respect. Okay, NASA's staffing profile. With limited personnel dedicated to each provider, which was not tailored to address provider plan readiness or culture, resulted in resources shifting to the highest priority at the time. So I was saying earlier on that issues with schedules was a huge issue. And I was saying that the acquisition strategy and contracts was a huge issue. This is a huge issue. And again, this is affecting multiple programs. So you're not just giving a questionable service to the crew commercial CCP, Starliner. There's also potential questions over the SpaceX one as well. And so the learning from this live stream series and the workshop could also benefit that program as well. So if you're involved in that, I'd certainly be looking at this and going through my live streams and attend the workshop to learn what things you could do about that in the future. But again, it goes back to the controller. Who or what is the controller of the staffing program? Who is it? Is it somebody that's got feedback from the safety team? Hey, you're screwing our program up and burning our people out, trying to do difficult things. You're affected the safety of the program. Or what? Who or what is that doing that? Do they even know this is the problem they're having? I don't know. Does it come from outside the program? Is it somebody somewhere outside the program that's making all these constraints on the way that the team behaves and performs? And if so, do they get any feedback? What feedback have they got? Has there been any feedback? Do they even know that they've caused these problems? Contribute to these problems. This is one of my bugbears. I'd argue that human resources is one of the biggest dangers to a complex program after leadership and program management, project management. I say that facetiously, but also from painful experience. And I'm moaning. It's Friday night. I'm moaning. Recruitment. How do you recruit safety engineers? Let's put a job ad out there. Come and do some safety work with us. But we're not going to tell you the salary. We're not going to tell you the benefits. So you just have to come for the love of the job. Well, when people get smart and realise how difficult and painful it is working in a complex program like this, they're just not going to come for mediocre salaries and dealing with nonsense. And I think the COVID, the cough that can't be named, when people started working from home, that really started to wake people up to how bad the deal was that they had. You're basically forced to commute, turn up to work. You're not necessarily compensated given the level of stress and hassle you have to deal with. And then, of course, you've got time spent commuting that you're never ever going to get back. So what's the deal? It's not a very good deal, is it? Anyway, let's keep going. Right, NASA staff was oversubscribed with limited amount of time to integrate across multiple platforms, systems, e.g., integration between propulsion hardware and thermal expertise disconnected until crew flight test. So again, this is how the staff were managed, structured, and their work was broken down and structured. Who was in charge of that? Who was the controller for that? NASA had limited system level understanding to inform proper risk-based assessments. I've already moaned about the concept of risk-based assessments on yesterday's live stream, so I'm not going to moan about that too much today. Possibly limited knowledge in integrated testing expertise. Personnel turnover. There's the first mention of it. I'm going to make it pink. There we go. Personnel turnover in key areas. I was wondering when that was going to raise its head. And now it has. Could have impacted handover during certification efforts. No, mate. It most definitely did. I can absolutely be certain of that. And it says STRB chairs just there, look. And if I remember correctly, that's the Safety Technical Review Board. Is that right? Let's just have a look at the organisation chart. Where is it? There we go. STRB, yes, the Commercial Crew Safety Technical Review Board. Right, okay, so if you've got the, hang on, Safety Technical Review Board, there we go. So if you've got musical chairs, so to speak, you're changing the control structure. So if we go back to our little structural analysis section, dynamics and changes evolution in the structure, organization changes. That is a change to the control structure. So it will have an impact. You might not be able to measure that impact, but it will have an impact. And especially with the quality of handovers. And in my experience, handovers are nearly always not very good, if any at all. I mean, the number, there was one program I turned up on. I was basically told, oh, yeah, this is a fantastic program. You really like this one. It'd be fantastic. And when I rocked up, I was like the seventh or eighth safety engineer in the space of 2 years, or maybe 3 years, something ridiculous like that. And there was no handover, literally no handover. And so to learn and understand what was going on, I had to read and speak to loads and loads of people. And of course, when you read an information that's not maintained, it's not updated, or it's in a what I call a digital landfill site, Microsoft SharePoint, the digital landfill of everybody's hate. You don't know what's what. You don't know where things are. You've got no introduction. You have to basically do an archaeological exercise to understand what information exists and then whether it's relevant or not. All while the clock is ticking and things are moving on, and people are like, "Come on, you've been here 5 minutes. Come on, you need to get some work done." It's like, well, I don't know where I am. I need to observe, orientate, decide, and act. I need to go through a couple of OODA loops. Cheers, boys. So yeah, if this stuff is going on, it's not could have had an impact. It will have done. You just haven't been able to detect it or measure it. Okay, right. Resources were a challenge for the NASA and commercial provider due to multiple factors, including subcontractor layers, leaving little time to be curious. Yeah, so you're going to burn out all your subcontractors. You're going to annoy them all, and they're just not going to want to stick around, especially if they're not getting the support they need. So it's not surprising. It's like I said earlier on. Go and talk to your safety engineers. Ask them, especially the contractors. They will tell you. Well, some will, some won't, because they don't want to get the contract terminated for being too open and honest. But that's the kind of nonsense we have to deal with. Anyway, right, requirements then. CCP developed a good set of requirements. Who said it was a good set of requirements? Where's that evidence come from? I'm skeptical about that. But that's just me. I'm old. I've been around a bit. Anyway, including design and construction standards, the CCP 1100 series of requirements. I wonder how many requirements they had in their database. And I wonder if they use doors or whether they use some of the Atlassian software tools that everyone hates. Were deliberately written. Oh, here we go. Were deliberately written at a higher level, leaving room for provider innovation, but there was also room for incorrect, inadequate interpretation by providers. Yes, well, of course there was. And that's why it's so important there are regular feedback loops to make sure that that interpretation is on point and that it can be, dealt with earlier than later. So again, requirement. I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised. Specifically for spacecraft propulsion, there was no specific design and construction standards levied on this complex system, which encompasses propulsion, qualification, and testing at system or subsystem levels. Okay, so again, this is another key topic that is not a surprise. This is the same kind of nonsense we have on loads of programs all over the world. And we wonder why we keep having accidents. CCP did not ensure adequate... Oh my God. CCP did not ensure adequate flow down of NASA requirements and design and construction standards to Boeing specifications or the flow down of those to Boeing suppliers' verifications. Okay, so you've got the CCP level not adequately flowing down requirements and design construction standards. Then you've got the equivalent of Boeing doing the same to their suppliers. And then you've got suppliers that are trying to do their best and then they can't do their best, so they just comply with the contract. And so all these gaps and all of this technical debt is essentially hidden until somebody brave enough to stick their head above the parapet says, hey, something not right here. These requirements are not good. We haven't got the requirements, or the requirements are late. What can I say? Another red flag in the program management. If the requirements are late, or if the supplier hasn't received requirements from a higher level controller in the structure, that should be absolutely raging on the dashboard of program management. And actions must be taken to address that. And if it's just left to be kicked down the road, you're just storing up technical debt and safety debt all the way to oblivion. And again, people know this stuff. This is not a surprise. This happens on all complex programs. It's just how we deal with it and manage it that's different. So there's another recommendation, a serious recommendation there. That must be sorted out. And again, it will be the same recommendation for other programs. Go and audit your other programs. If they're also suffering with this nonsense, they're also at higher risk of having a serious accident. Okay, right. Component and subsystem specifications were developed. Hang on a second. Yeah. No, hang on. NASA requirements and design and construction standards to Boeing specifications. Right, okay. Right. So component and subsystem specifications were developed before mission designs were complete. For example, the AR specification, don't know what that is. Is that architectural specification? I don't know. Let's have a look. Let's go to the acronyms list, which is about there. There it is. Look at that. That was a good guess, wasn't it? Right, AA. No, it's not in there. It's not in there. The AR specification includes mission timeline and representative duty cycles, but doesn't have the real mission duty cycle. Okay. I mean, that is, that is a serious contributor as well. Whoever is developing those specifications, let the control action is develop the specifications and document them and pass them on to where they need to go. But there's a timing context related to that control action. So let's just zoom out for a second. Let's just zoom out. Well, there we go. That's what I'm looking for. Right. So if we're talking about types of control actions, types of contributory control actions, if we're talking about developing the component and subsystem specifications, so who is the controller? First off, who is the controller that does that? And then the control action that they provide is, it's not that they didn't provide it, because they did provide some specifications. So it's they provided it, but what is the timing, duration, sequence element to it? So if they provide it early, too early, as in developed before mission designs were complete, then we know that these specifications are going to be questionable. They may be completely wrong. They may be incorrect. And so if that is going on in your program, then you've got a potential problem. I've seen this a number of times, but it's often the program project managers that turn around and say, well, we're sticking to the program, that's it. And it's like, well, if you stick to the program in that way with those critical safety dependencies, you're going to end up having either to do some serious rework or you're going to have an accident. Which is it? And their view is, well, we've got a schedule to follow. So, if we deliver them on time before some other dependency, that's not our problem. The client's going to have to pay for that. They're going to have to pay for an update to these specifications because their mission designs were not complete. So the question is, who is the controller that's coordinating that stuff? It needs to be coordinated. It's a critical safety program dependency that has very real potential consequences. And again, the specification that includes the mission timeline and representative duty cycles, but does not have the real mission duty life cycle. So who is it that provides that specification? And are they making sure everybody knows that they haven't got the real mission duty cycle yet? Because that should be coordinated and broadcast across the entire engineering community and the status of it. And the fact it's not done or it's delayed or late or whatever, it should be on everybody's dependency dashboard. I mean, I'm talking about stuff that I'm preaching to the choir, I'm sure. But again, these are not surprising. This is program management, program safety management. So why was it not working very well? Why was it not coordinated? That's what the investigation should go and figure out and fix. Because if that nonsense is not fixed, it's rot. It's basically rotting your program from the inside. Materials compatibility requirements were not well defined for hypergolics. Again, why? Why were they not? Why was that? Boeing chose to conduct analysis versus tests and were generally implemented after encountering. Who or what is the controller doing that? Why did it make sense for them to do that? I can't accept that this is, poor engineering, the basics not done. Something else is going on here. Why is this going on? What I don't want to accept it's that. Because it's easy just to blame the humans. It's easy to say, oh well, they're just incompetent. They just didn't do the job properly. They just didn't care. I don't think it's any of that. I don't think it's any of that. I think the way this has happened is because of some serious reasons, and we need to figure out what that is and put it right. Okay, right. Where else are we? Let's have a look. So, design, testing, and hardware build. Key design decisions were made before CCT cap. So key design decisions were made. So if we just have a look at if we just have a look at this, if they're provided too early, is with a particular context, is that a contributor control action? Key design decisions were made before CTT cap. Sounds like it to me. With limited government interaction observing PDR, CDR. Okay, so they were not involved early enough. Why was that? Was it because they just weren't invited to the meetings? And if they were, why was that? Why did that make sense? Were they specifically excluded from the meetings for whatever reason? Let's look at that. Let's figure that out. Okay, so the basic architecture was set in 2010, evolved slightly through PDR and CDR. Once on contract, it was difficult to implement changes impactful to the design architecture codified via the contract. There we go. This is why STPA will benefit your programs, because you can use it so much earlier in the life cycle than fault trees and event trees and everything else. Component levels PDR CDRs were conducted without Boeing or NASA. What? Ah, dearie me. Why? Why did it make sense to do that? Is it because of the contract? Is it because of resource limitations? So that suggests then that all of the PDR and CDRs, or maybe the final CDR, whatever it is, needs to be reviewed top to bottom, as though you're doing a fresh CDR. That's what that sounds like. That's a recommendation. Multiple corrosion and contamination issues were observed during hardware builds at suppliers throughout the life of the program. So somebody knew that these issues were going on. Somebody knew about these issues. Why did they not find their way up to the other parts of the control structure so that they could get into the part of the control structure making decisions about whether they should put, go flying in the first place, but then also put people on board? What is it about the control structure that influences that, those issues and their communication? Service module hardware anomalies resulted in most likely cases were hang on. Service module hardware anomalies resulted in most likely causes, where root cause was often not fully resolved due to service module disposal. Not sure I quite understand that. Is it that there were some anomalies, but we couldn't resolve those anomalies because the service module is destroyed? Heritage hardware was largely designed for procurement, planning. Heritage hardware was used as justification to reduce testing, but did not appropriately assess operating environments and duty cycles. So who is assessing these things? What part of the organization? Is it the supplier? Is it Boeing? Is it NASA? Is it a combination of all three? And why didn't they do that? I mean, it's basic engineering for this stuff. So why was that not done? What is it about the control structure about this? Why does it make sense that it was not done? Hardware was largely designed for procurement planning before contract award, with little room for change after contract award. Yeah, I mean, I've seen this, and it is really frustrating because the contract, the way the contracts are let, I don't know about this particular situation, but in a lot of my past experience, painful experience, often people, supply chain, rush to deliver contracts to suppliers. Suppliers will copy and paste what they've always done and say, well, here it is, and it's more expensive because it's a new one. They don't actually address the problems that they've always had, or they inherit the design from some other supplier, or they buy it out, whatever. They assume that it's already okay. they knock up a copy and paste safety case, and then when it comes to actually reviewing it and committing to install the thing, the independent review says, well, this safety case is a load of nonsense. What about this, this, and this? And then they argue about, oh, well, we're going to break our contracts, time dependencies, and we're going to lose money or whatever it is. Can we just get this pushed forwards and then we'll sort it out afterwards? And then if you let them do that, they then never sort it out because they expect more money for it. Even though, when they're negotiating the contracts in the first place, you'd think that they'd negotiate properly and make sure that they've got enough fat to deal with any issues that pop out. And of course, there will always be issues, but you have to anticipate them. But, somebody somewhere, there's a group of people somewhere that just don't seem to anticipate there's going to be problems. They just assume everything's going to be fine and proceed on that basis. It's just ridiculous. And then expect that they'll deal with it commercially, contractually later on. And all that does is stress people out and waste a load of time and ultimately leads in no change going on. Yeah, so that's it, with little room for change after contract award. So ultimately, when you look at this and look at the layer of contract control and procurement planning and all of that stuff, contractual relationships, that part of the control structure is one of the hugest, problems for safety and safety management. But with STAMP and building a control structure, we can now make those issues explicit. We can shine a huge spotlight on it and show how it undermines safety and contributed to these catastrophic outcomes. Of course, those stakeholders are not going to be very happy about that because they're not used to being spotlighted in an accident investigation report. But these are the kind of systematic program issues that need to be addressed. And until we start dealing with these problems properly, we're going to have repeated issues such as this that are very expensive and costly to fix. And it reminds me of that saying. In fact, let me just, for the sake of a nail, the kingdom was lost. That's it. Yeah, where does that come? For want of a nail, the kingdom was lost. So it's an old poem, an old proverb. For want of a nail, the kingdom was lost. And what that means is the horseshoe on a knight's horse was lost because it didn't have a nail in it properly. It wasn't fitted properly, or the nail was missing. And because that knight's horse was not as effective as it perhaps should be, the knight wasn't as effective. And because the knight wasn't effective, the ripple effects across the battlefield led to the battle being lost, which led to the war being lost, which led to the kingdom being lost. And I really like that sort of proverb because it sort of highlights this. The people involved in, horseshoes, the furriers, and putting nails in and making sure it's maintained properly, because that control loop was not adequate, that had ripple effects across the entire control structure. This is what we're talking about here. Instrumentation had room for improvement to adequately capture thruster temperature, usable pressure, chamber data, and data rates. Okay, so why was it not improved? Why was it not made better? What was the decision making? I would have thought on a flight test, with crew, you'd be trying to get all the data you possibly could and then some. And the propulsion qualification testing lacked a flight-like approach. Okay, well, what does that mean? Why is that? Boeing did not document test like you fly. Test like you fly, or test as you operate expectations for component level testing and mission testing phase testing was not executed. Again, why was that? Why did Boeing or the supplier not do that testing? Why would it make sense? This was not captured as a requirement violation in the verification and validation plan. Again, why was that? This is all of this is about engineering integrity, engineering process integrity, and the management of it. It doesn't sound like there was any kind of control over that, or if there was, it was not effective. So why was that? Let's have a look at it. Let's make sense of it. Okay, so this has got one last page for recommendations and lessons learned, and then we can get into the helium system issues. So I'm just looking at the clock. It's 8 o'clock. I think we can get through this today, now, and then we'll pull stumps, and then we'll crack on next week with another couple of live streams. Yeah, let's just check the chat and have a drink, see if anyone's shouting at me. Apparently not, so I should be doing a good job. There we go. Right, so recommendations and lessons learned. Recommendation: consider dedicated resources for critical systems per provider. So I agree with that. I would make one change. The control structure must provide dedicated resources for critical systems and functions per spacecraft design per provider. There's no consider. That's what it should be, given the capabilities of people and human beings and their ability to learn things, the speed of learning, the retention of information, and the potential for misunderstanding or misinterpreting things. Because I've seen situations where you have an expert in a function or a system that is deployed across multiple programs that have different architectures, different limitations, different implementations, and they misremember experience or knowledge of a system, and they use that experience on the subject of the conversation, and they argue a point about the system behaves this way, so this is what will happen and this is how we deal with it. And then a new person that's been there 5 minutes and has been reading the actual documents puts their hand up and says, well, hang on a minute, SME, I've read the technical document for this and it contradicts everything you've just said. And that's a bit embarrassing, of course. And there's a lot of ego potentially involved in that. But that's just human beings. If you're expected to keep in your head multiple system design architectures with different build standards and configurations, that's really not what humans' brains are used to doing. So let's try and avoid that systematic fault in safety assessments and design by forcing people into that situation. Let's have dedicated resources. Let's support them in becoming an SME so that they're not going to make big mistakes that they're not even going to recognize until someone calls them out. And that's if there is someone, a young person who's just read the document detail and is of the kind of person who will put their hand up and challenge a senior SME. Not many people will do that, especially if they're new in the job or a contractor. You know, there are certain contractors out there that won't say boo to a goose in case they upset someone and get the contract terminated. Whereas there are others, like myself, that we have to say something. It is our professional duty to do that, even if it results in potentially negative consequences. So let's keep going. So qualification testing campaign should be augmented TLYF. So let's just capture that. Test like you fly. TLYF. And the other one is test as you operate. Yeah, I mean, just on that comment there, on test. I was working with a client a few years ago, a world-renowned, world-class client doing some fantastic work. And when we were doing I provided them some stamp foundation training, and then we did a workshop together live in person. And we had members from the design development team, the test team, the the safety team, the certification team, the cybersecurity team, and we also had somebody representing the test team, the testers, and they're a different breed. They're fantastic because, like I said earlier on about the red team, blue team and red team scenario. The red team is there to try and break your stuff. And that's what testers are there to do. So they think outside the box and they use their experience from past experience testing things, and they could really help the designers anticipate problems and fix them before they get found in test. So they save a lot of money. And so one of the things I recommend is make sure you have testers involved in your safety work. Make sure they are an SME, a core SME, like human factors people. Make sure you've got human factors engineers, human factors psychologists, testers, test engineers, flight test engineers in this case as well, along with your other team members, because they absolutely enrich the work so much, and they can come out with some really fantastic stuff that you might be like, well, what? I don't believe that. And they're like, yeah, we tested it, we did that, we broke it, this is what we need to do to fix it. So yeah, get them involved, get testers involved. Right, test like you fly. Okay, consider hardware spares availability. No. We don't consider. It must be controlled. It must be adequate. There's no just consider it. It must be done. The control structure must ensure necessary hardware spares are available. That's it. Because if we don't, this is what happens. We end up with putting people in space that really shouldn't be in space on a spacecraft that's not qualified. In-site access should be provided across the Boeing teams. Again, access to data must be provided. It is essential. There is a contract mentioned earlier on that says, there are penalties for not providing access. It must be provided. Do what you can. Do what needs to be done to make it happen. And if there are any barriers in the way, do what's necessary to address the barriers. It is necessary for the functioning of the control structure and its ability to control hazards and deal with its consequences. There's no should or consider. It must happen. Suppliers build quality variability insight should be rectified. No. It's got to be rectified. For the control structure to do what it needs to do, it must be rectified. Use as is. Dispositions should only be considered after exhausting options for hardware changes. Yeah, I mean, this is about changing the control algorithm for the decision maker, the body, the panel, whoever it is, for use as is. And I'd argue this also means needs to be a change in the control structure for the commercial procurement people, whoever's involved in that, and the safety assessment, and using the output of the safety assessment to inform those decisions. They shouldn't be allowed to just go off and use as is. That decision should be carefully considered and documented. And especially when, it might be, oh, we'll just get this off the shelf. We've already done this before. We've already used this. This is just a different circumstance, different context, but it's basically the same. Let's do it. Those kind of decisions, they look simple, but it really has to be dealt with very carefully, because reuse for different contexts. If you use an STPA, you can find what those new dangerous subtle contexts are before you walk into a minefield. But if you're not doing that, then you've got to do it. You're gonna come unstuck if you do this kind of stuff. Increase the rigor in evaluating UAs. Unexpected anomalies, is it? Increase the rigor. Yes, I agree with that. I would say, I think the chat, I think you know what I'm going to say, don't you? Where's my pen gone? There it is. Where is it? Use stamp STPA and cast. I'll probably focus on stamp on STPA, to be honest, but that is what I'd recommend. That is what you should do. To increase the rigor, make it better, do that. And I'm hoping from all of these live streams, all 29 plus, we're going to have a 30th, maybe more, next week. Use Stamp STPA. I'm hoping you'll see from the live streams that it will provide benefit. And if you need help to do that, please get in touch. Don't struggle. because you can spend time trying to figure it out yourself and trying to learn it yourself and read all the books and papers and all of the other good stuff. But you need to do this fast. You don't want to be faffing around and wasting years, because every week or month that you waste trying to figure it out without any help is opportunity lost. And when you're working on a program of this scale, that disproportionate impact could be in the millions, if not billions, very, very quickly. So don't try to climb Mount Everest on your own the first time. That's all I can say. Co-develop, and this program most certainly is a Mount Everest scale. It might even be an Olympus Mons on Mars kind of scale program. If you understand that reference, Olympus Mons is the largest mountain in the solar system. I think it's like 25 kilometers high or something ridiculous, 26 kilometers. Anyway, co-develop schedule assessments to drive achievable schedules and to ensure that risk-based decisions can be driven by credible inputs. Yeah, that's a good one. I like that, but it doesn't fundamentally address the controller that does the scheduling and makes schedule decisions and how they collect information and deal with the feedback. This is not addressing the controller; it's addressing what they should be doing. We need to go further than that. There's a big thing we need to dig into there with how the schedule is done, how it's planned. Ensure commercial providers take ownership in preparing the acceptance rationale and providing verification evidence. Okay, so when we say ensure, is it that they already have a role and responsibility to do that? And if so, why were they not doing it? Who's holding them to account? What is that accountability feedback loop like? And if they weren't doing that, does that mean the contracts were inadequate? And if so, the contracts need fixing. And also, the contracts should be checked for anything else that's missing from a roles and responsibilities perspective. So, yeah, revisit the perception that NASA technical team often felt forced to prove it's unsafe or prove that it will fail when there was insufficient evidence provided to prove it was safe. So again, when it says revisit the perception, is that an action to go and understand a bit more about it and find out? It sounds like it is. Absolutely agree. That needs to be sorted out, and it needs to be clear in everyone's roles and responsibilities what their role and responsibility is. And it's not NASA proving it's unsafe. It is the supplier, the commercial provider, demonstrating that it is safe and that the evidence, verification and validation evidence they provide is representative and robust. NASA should be just looking at it going, yeah, it looks good to me. It shouldn't be digging into it and trying to prove it's unsafe. That's not what they should be doing. Consider bringing in high-level expertise from outside the program to evaluate critical anomaly resolutions. That is interesting. That is interesting. I think that's a good idea. I would certainly help with that. I could, absolutely go to town on that. I'm pretty sure my safety spidey sense could certainly find some interesting things for us to deal with, and also how to resolve it. But I think that's a good idea. I think that's a great idea, and I would suggest using STPA for that. Fantastic. Right. Okay. So the last half a page, and then we'll call it a break for this evening, Friday night. Here we go. Right. Lessons learned. Identify key system level expertise in high risk areas to endorse critical design decisioning. Yeah, okay, I agree with that. Again, were those people present in the first place? If not, why not? I mean, is this there's two things here. The first is having the right people, the right controllers involved in the structure at the right time. But it's also, sorry, let me say that again. So it's about having the right people, the right stakeholders, the right controllers involved in the control structure, but then also making sure that they do their magical stuff at the right point in the program with the right dependencies. Because it's, once the design has been decided, there's incredible pressure not to revisit it or change it. And so that incredible pressure to do that, wherever it comes from, needs to be diffused so that people have got the space to do what they need to do from an engineering perspective. And if that means delays in the program, that means delays in the program. That's the nature of the beast, unfortunately. And I can appreciate there are knock-on second-order effects elsewhere that need to be managed, but it's not this team's responsibility to manage the risk elsewhere. They have to do what they need to do to be able to achieve their program, the safe design that they need. All space flight programs should incorporate the soon-to-be released NASA Propulsion Standard and the Test Like You Fly principles. I mean, I'd like to see that. I'd like to do a stamp review of that, because that might highlight some interesting things before it gets built into other propulsion systems. Increase awareness of agreements with major suppliers. Major subcontractors and suppliers, and how requirements are flowed down and verified. I think that's fantastic. But again, is how requirements are flowed down and verified, is that actually working properly? On some complex programs, often it's just left to fester. It gets kicked down the road. It's a job that everybody hates. The tools they use are just mind numbing. They don't work very well. Requirements errors and updates and baselines get out of hand. It really is a horrible activity, and it's just made worse by having bad tools. So increasing awareness is part of it, but it's also making sure that process and everyone involved can actually do what they need to do. And of course, you've also got people who need to understand requirements decomposition and what is a requirement. And I know one of the criticisms is levelled at me with regards to STAMP, STPA and CAST is some of the safety some of the safety constraints or requirements that we generate as part of a STAMP STPA analysis. Some of them are a flavour of the controller must do X with whatever context, or it is the controller or control structure must not do X with whatever context. The must nots arguably are not formal requirements languages. They're not formal requirements because you can't verify and validate a negative, a not. And so you have to get quite creative about how you deal with that specific subset of constraints requirements. And so if you have a requirements manager who is like, no, we won't accept any negative requirements. They're not requirements. We're not going to include them. The question then becomes, well, where are we going to include these? Because these are important safety constraints. The controller must not do X when Y context occurs. Where are we going to capture that? It must be captured because it's come from the safety assessment and it's important. So how, Mr. Mrs. Requirements Manager, are we going to deal with this? And it may be that you just have a separate section in the requirements set that is called, in the case of the must requirements, a set of those must requirements will be functional requirements for the controller, but they've arrived from a safety assessment. There's another conversation there which I could talk about. What is a safety requirement? So you'll have functional requirements. These are requirements on the functionality of the controller, what it must or must not do. So you'll have a set of functional requirements, controller must do X. But of those must not constraints, you might want to capture them in a separate but related section. Arguably, I'd keep them all together, but it depends how the requirements management system works and how pedantic the requirements management is. But they must be captured and they must be dealt with, and they must be evidence that has been fulfilled in whatever form they can. And then, of course, you'll have potentially non-functional requirements that originate from STPA control loop analysis, causal scenario analysis. So these might be that you need diverse redundant sensors or actuators, or you need extra feedback for certain safety reasons. And they could be functional or non-functional requirements. You might have physical requirements for the controller, such as the temperature range or the EMH, electromagnetic hardness, or electromagnetic compatibility. You might have vibration requirements. You might have, all manner of other physical requirements for your system, your control path, your feedback path, and elsewhere. And of course, they are technical requirements I'm talking about for your technical systems, but you might also identify requirements for the humans or the ground control team or even elsewhere. Excuse me. So yeah, your requirement set may need to be expanded to cover not just the technical and system requirements for the product, the system you're delivering, the spacecraft, but also for ground control for the human operators. And obviously, I don't know what the requirements management architecture is for this program, but not all requirements management systems or processes actually deal with humans and human factors very well, or organizational aspects, and then making sure the content of the instruction manuals or the procedures are appropriate. It depends how evolved and mature the specific organizations are that we're talking about. Okay, closely investigate the use of legacy hardware designs with alternative applications. Yes, I completely agree with that. Fantastic. Prioritize detailed component level data and NASA involvement in design reviews, e.g. propulsion components. Yeah, agree. Require adequate hardware and system level integrated testing with a solid understanding of validation testing plans early. Yeah, so one of the other benefits of STPA, because you can do it so early and you can drive controller requirements and control loop requirements, by extension, those constraints and requirements you generate, they will find their way into a validation and verification test plan. So you can design the tests much earlier, more quickly than perhaps you would be used to. Consider adequate hardware spares availability. Again, it's back to this one up here. Consider hardware spares availability. Oh no, I can't do that, can I? There we go. Not that one, this one, Simon. Consider adequate hardware spares availability for subsequent anomaly resolutions. What is the control loop for that already? And how are they informed from the spares availability above? There must be adequate hardware spares availability for anomaly resolutions. And given we've already had a load of anomalies already, we're probably going to have more, so make sure there's enough spares. Okay, critical design reviews as a part of the certification strategy should be performed under contract where direct feedback and success criteria can be achieved. No, it needs to be must. There must be the involvement of those controllers. They must be working together and providing feedback and addressing feedback together. It's not a should, it's a must. Ensure the technical teams have readily available access to appropriate insight data. Yes. Again, it says ensure. It's a must. This must happen. Let's get it done. Right, so that's up to page 248. So the overall report is 311 pages. So we are getting close now. We're less than about 50 pages from the end. And also, you'll notice, I'll just quickly zoom through. So this section has 4 pages, 2 pages, 4 pages, 3 pages. So that'll be quite quickly. And then the next biggest section is this one. But most of it is blacked out, redacted. So we'll whiz through that really quickly. And then we've got another couple of pages. And then we're done. Then we're into the appendices. And the appendices is not very big. So I think with another maybe 2 to 4 hours, maybe 6 hours. I think we'll be through this investigation report. So let's just mark out where we got to. No, it's not that one, it's this one, isn't it? Hang on. No, this one. Stretch. Yeah, so we'll be on to helium issues in the next live stream. Then we'll do thermal issues, then the thruster issues, and then the SDRT report, then the STAR senior panel, and then we've already done conclusions. So 1 page, so we could do it again, and then the appendix, the appendix, not the appendices. So yeah, that's where we go. So we're getting through this STAR report really well, and we'll crack on with the next. I'll set some more dates for next week. So there we go. I hope you've enjoyed that session. I know it's quite long, quite hard going, but we are very close now to the end, and I'm going to send out an email to join the live workshop. So I'm going to run a live workshop. If you haven't already joined the waiting list, please click the link in the comments, join the waiting list, and I'll email you when I'm ready to run the session. And we'll all get together a couple of hours, maybe a couple of 3 hours, maybe 2 or 3 hours, talk about it to our heart's content, answer any questions you've got. And like I say, if there's anything that struck you as really relevant to what you're doing today and you want to have a conversation, please visit my website, click the button, I need help now. The website is whiteley-safety.co.uk. There's a link in the description. Send me a message. Don't be shy. Let's have a conversation and see how I can possibly help. Because as I've already said today, the sooner that you start trying to use STAMP, STPA or CAST, the sooner that you'll get benefits. I guarantee we'll find some interesting things. We'll find ways to fix issues that you've got that will be grossly disproportionate. You will save an absolute fortune. The more complex, big, difficult, painful your program, the bigger the savings, the improvements that you'll make, both in finance, time, mission success, and of course, safety. So anyway, thank you very much for watching. And I will see you on the next live stream next week. Have a great weekend. Take care.